This is the Cathode Ray Podcast with Steve and Lewis.
Yeah,
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 46 of the Cathode Ray Podcast. I'm here with my friend Steve Nutter. We're going to talk about our week, some of the issues in retro gaming that have been affecting us and projects we've been working on this week. Steve, how you doing, mate?
I'm wonderful. Doing much better now. And
yeah, how's that health going?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. I did have another update or another. I did go back for a checkup. And they told me they still want me to basically lay low for a couple more weeks. Okay. So like 6 more weeks, or not 6 more weeks, 6 weeks total from the end of this when it happened basically at the beginning of February. So I'll be relaxing still till about mid-March. But still been trying to do some things because it gets boring when you sit around for 6 weeks. You know,
it is, and the more healthy you get, the less times you can post medical Instagram, YouTube videos. And
I
get
am
all
so
that
bored
engagement.
with that. Yeah, now it's like too much. I'm not really.
The crazies were fun for a little while, but then,
yeah, I was like, I just need to move on from that. So I was like, good, this is a good time. So yeah, I actually probably by the time this episode comes out, people have seen the new episode of Retro Tech that I had where I did you've seen at least just the little funny front bit that I was working on, but
so what's the point of your video? Give us the quick summary.
Yeah, because I mean we're going to talk about the biggest problem in retro today, the biggest, you know, like all those catchy thumbnails that people were doing on saying that it was just the gatekeepers, but it's a freaking creative, most creative way I could come up with for trying to bait people into watching an entertaining video about shipping damage to retro. I mean, we've been talking about it for a couple of weeks. This last one I'm working on. So yeah, I mean, I had some good stuff there where I was able to show a couple monitors, some posts from people. I have I had over 70 pictures that I put in like this really depressing slideshow in the middle of it. Just it's like an ode to these CRTs that have all been destroyed from ground shipping. And I didn't just basically talk about the problem. I also gave a tutorial at the end on actually how to use the company I've talked about a couple times before, UShip.
Oh, UShip, sure.
So I actually went through, showed how you'd set up a new shipment just to get like a quote so you could understand how much it would cost and how easy it is to make a listing on there.
Good.
So yeah, that's that second half of that video. So yeah, it was fun. I definitely spent way more time editing that than probably 95% of the things I've worked on here, but with the extra time from not being able to do physical stuff, I'll do that.
Nice. That's good. This week I've been working on analyzing and looking at the S-Video framework for Mister, and it kind of just dropped out of nowhere, and we were like, what is this? How does it work? How does it all bit? So I've spent the last couple of days with Lou from Lou's Retro Source. So what we're doing is he's going to do his shorter video, which is Lou's short, sharp, to the point. You want to know everything in 10 minutes, Lou's got the video. And then we're recording a podcast tomorrow, talky, longer discussion, getting into talking about this new framework and some of the ins and outs. And I've been testing the S video out of it. What they're also done is there's a capability for the core itself to generate composite. So previously, it was just S-Video, Chroma and Luma coming out of the Mister, and you had to mix it externally. And I remember asking Mike Simone, and I was like, hey, Mike, how come you're mixing it externally? Why don't you just mix composite internally? And his answer back then was it was one of those programming engineering problems that seemed easier to do in a dongle, in hardware. And it seemed easier than coding it in software. And I guess, but now essentially what Sorg has implemented is that in software. Now, I tried it, it's not very good.
Really?
I couldn't even get a proper stable picture. And that's well known. And to me, this reflects what Mike said. It's a fucking hard thing to do. So they've got beta version out right now. And I'm not sure, I think it may still always need a dongle or something. But, you know, to me, it was like a nice milestone that actually we're getting close to a place where you can just stick a composite cable straight into a Mister and bada boom, bada bing, get some signal out. So I've been screwing around with all those updates. I'm looking forward to talking to Lou about it tomorrow and getting that video out. All the frameworks are being updated, and it looks great on the And the next thing, actually, Steve, your thoughts on this concept. It feels like with the advent of the S-Video and composite coming out of the Mister, these are as good as composite will ever, like, let's say composite. It's as good as composite will ever be. You know, like that format, that signal standard with the analogness, it's really as good it was ever be. And like, what was previously, Steve, when you needed the primo best of composite signal, what did you hook up to a monitor? How were you getting the best composite?
Wow, that's a great question, because there's so many weird things that can just even contribute to giving you bad composite video. And even, like a guy like Keith Rainey would be someone good to talk about this more about like color and stuff, and like Artemio, because he would explain to me that the colors are just naturally off on a lot of these old consoles. Right. Like the actual color spectrum is not the real, it's again, it's kind of like that those color palettes on the original even or NES RGB mod. You could have a couple different palettes to choose from. And it was always about which one looks better, which one's actually right, because you could be playing it on your TV through the composite or RF before that mod, and it could have looked either way. So going back to your question, I normally would try the SNES. If you think about like the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis, unless you have that RGB modded and probably the TurboGrafx NEC console, those can produce like some pretty bad jail bars just out of composite videos. So there's a lot of as you go further down the road in newer consoles, the composite video is a little bit better, I feel like. But I think like the SNES would be the earliest one I was really considering as a good test subject.
I was thinking SNES. That's typically, if I had to do, I've got a one chip here, but you can also get the same results by installing something like Voltar's mod to any stock Super Nintendo. And that's what I would have thought to use. But someone did raise the point to me. Wii is modern, good availability of component cables. Even a power one can technically do RGB. 480p can come out of it, 240p. So if you're using the emulators, the Genesis emulator with the homebrew on the Wii, it was suggested that using the emulator, putting out 240p is another extremely high-quality way to get composite, which I'd forgotten about.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And like you said, you can easily find Wii's everywhere.
Yeah.
And just one more thing about the older consoles is if you don't use either one of the really good few like power supplies that are modern, or you use an original one, you have to use those. Or if you use some generic one, there's often a chance, especially over composite, it will add all kinds of artifacts and weird little things that shouldn't be there, almost like an RF signal where it would have snow in the picture. So that's something to consider. But
that's a really good point. So I'm using good quality third-party ones. I've got a 5-volt and a 9-volt. They're not Triad, but they're another really good brand, high-quality ones. I've got like a polarity inverter. I've got different plug ends because like the PAL Super NES is like slightly different, and you've got to check the center pin positive, nega pin positive, and the Firebrand X PSU page is very good information for all this. So it's a good point about the quality of the power. I run a few of my Japanese consoles. I run them through a power converter. So Europe is 240 volts. Japan is I think it's like
100.
Are you 100? You're 100?
No,
you're
we're
110?
110, 120. Japan's 100.
Right, but even though broadly like compatible, right? As much as
it's
I've
almost compatible
so
between us and Japan, but you can get you can damage certain things because if you bring stuff like here's an example, just real quick. There's the Hakko FR301, which is the suction tool I've done a video on that removes components. There's a Japanese version that's actually like $20 cheaper than the American version, and that's the only difference is it runs on 100 volts. And if they've actually said people that have bought it in America have said that the actual thing will burn up after using it for like a year because of that extra voltage in it over time.
That's interesting, and I wonder if particularly susceptible to it because it's a desoldering iron. There's a lot of heat, a lot of energy.
Lots of
it's really sucking a lot of juice. Yeah.
So
I'm using, because I'm here in 240 volts, I definitely have to use a converter. And I think even for the Japanese, anyway, for a few of those consoles, I am using just a fairly cheap downstep, converter, 240 to 100 or 110 converter. And I can't see any jail bars or issues, but I'm always looking at it like, I bet if there's a problem, it's going to be you, you fucking little thing. I bet. Gotcha. So I'm keen to see how having these new changes to Mister, the S video, and the composite, what does this help us some way with our monitor repairs to know that we're having essentially a new, very repeatable, with new hardware reference solution for analog video? I think that could be useful in what we do, Steve.
Yeah, it adds to the versatility of the DE10 Nano. If you were to think about it as just a tool, even to use, like you said, for calibration of monitors, well, if you can get the cleanest S video and composite video out of that, that's a modern device, and you know what you're outputting, basically, because what that's all programmed. So it's that is a really good idea to have, and then you can mimic that signal on over. Now you're just using the other consoles as just like a testing, like real life scenario testing, unless someone is just using a Mister also that this is going to, which is quite often the case nowadays. So
yeah, it's exciting time for this stuff. It's interesting anyway. The nerd, Once I finally got my head over, I was really.
I think it's pretty darn awesome that right now, like you said, it's pretty much new because it's just been integrated into the main updates. So we're at the beginning stages of that. So maybe I'm sure that by who knows when, but a lot of these things that maybe where you're saying it's not really working right now, that could change down the road if it's possible. I'm sure somebody will get obsessed with the topic,
And finally, out there, I don't have to rely on Mike because I know he's busy. He's got all this stuff. I want to my listeners out there, to people who are FPGA programmers and devs, can someone just for me, make a core that can output SECAM? Please, just make. I just want, for exactly that test purpose, I would love a unit that's like, this is 100% SECAM. We know what it is for the testing purposes for all these weird Euro monitors.
Oh, my goodness. So then you would put that. Do you actually find SECAM monitors that accept a signal better than, it wouldn't really matter, right, if you go better than S-Video, but I don't even know if they had SECAM S-Video.
I guess they would because, good question. I presume yes, because it could just be, it was the same like PAL, but just a bit different. Yeah. It was more that sometimes I get weird monitors. Also, let's not forget that apparently back in the Soviet Union, that was SECAM as well, before 91, right? So sometimes I find, I've showed you some of those weird old Soviet monitors with the TVs and the writing, and they've only got RF. So there are some use cases, I'm really stretching it, I know, but where it would be kind of useful to me to have a dedicated SECAM output just for, not for science, just for shits and giggles. So maybe someone will be working on that at some stage.
Finally see some SECAM in action, like you said. I don't, I do.
So obscure.
Well, I don't know where I would ever even see, unless I imported it, where I would ever even see a SECAM monitor or television. It's pretty, where it's just SECAM. These other ones will SECAM, but it would be fun because then I could test SECAM on the PVMs and see, again, what it looks like. Because, if you put, again, PAL on the PVM that supports both PAL and NTSC, it will, shrink the size of the screen, put it at the different 50 hertz, so it's actually doing something. So like you say, it would be fun to actually just see what's going on and have a test suite and a Mario port to SECAM only. A SECAM Nintendo. But it probably wouldn't have been called Nintendo, right? To get around the Soviet Union.
Back in the Soviets? No, that was Dendy. That was Dendy, what they called them. In the role.
Really?
Yeah, so that's another good point. I have all these old shitty Dendy systems. They were the knockoff Famicom clones that were available in the Soviet Union. So there is some point to it. It's not just me being a weirdo. It'd be fun to test some shit like that. So who knows how things are opening up? Devs are getting into it, and it'll be a good story to know. I haven't yet found the kind of backstory about how Sorg came to integrate this stuff into the framework and move there. So we're getting to that. This is all an evolving topic. We're getting to that.
Yeah, and I wonder if there ever will be like a good My Life in Gaming style documentary on kind of the development side of all the Mister. But I feel like there's probably too many crazy people that are like way out there that maybe probably, I don't know if they could sit down for an interview, you know?
Well, history's still happening.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's like the history's still happening.
Yeah.
And so it's like, is this going to be like 5 years from now? That'll be the big project. If there's, I don't know, you know, they're always talking about now, like what's the next thing going to be beyond the Mister, but I don't know. Cause the Mister's been around for a while now and established, but you have to figure that eventually, you know, that technology itself will just become phased out and it'll have to be built around something else, right?
Sure.
Because that stuff will just become harder to get. And then like we're already at a point now where getting a new DE10 Nano is over $200 still.
It was just, I don't have the full info, but just today I was seeing a lot of posts from A-Track 17 about an attempt to kind of on what you were saying, Steve. So rather than the DE10 Nano, they're attempting to use a few smaller boards. There's and use some more commodity-based, cheaper stuff that's kind of available from AliExpress, and then patch them together, it seemed, with some add-on boards or daughter boards or something like that to see if they could get somewhere with this. And it's that sort of, maybe that's coming together, so not relying on the D10 Nano, but sort of patching together a bunch of different boards that are more commonly available. So I understand where they're coming from with this, and before anyone goes crazy, the D10 Nano is going nowhere.
No,
it's not going out of style.
It doesn't even matter. Like if the retro gaming market just stopped buying them 100% for Misters, it wouldn't matter. Those would already be pre-sold and gone for some other reason, because we know that these devices are used. I guarantee you, we couldn't even imagine the ideas that people have used around these things in schools and developed things for probably industries that are based around these devices and using, you know, specific homebrewed code for that device to do different things. I feel like if we stopped buying them, there would still be the same amount of people almost wanting them, right? I mean,
still wanting them.
Yeah, it's like Raspberry Pis. It's like if people want them, they go out of stock. And that's all we're, you know, still in the stock thing.
Before we get to our main topic for the day, one final thing I just wanted to let everybody in on now that it's public knowledge. I just want to speak briefly about our friend Shank and his odd obsession with creating BVM cards. The young man has worked out with his electronic wizardry how to add things onto BVM input cards. And he had that Wii that he'd integrated into a BVM input card. And then the other night, and I know he dropped a tweet as well, he dropped a bunch of sample designs that he'd knocked up. And one of them I feel like was such a sleeper. And it's the simplest idea, a straight up HDMI input for a BVM.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do no conversion, don't do nothing to the signal. If you send 240p over HDMI, boom, that's what your monitor gets. And I'm like, holy shit, that's a fucking sleeper of a fantastic idea.
Yeah, that is a great idea. And well, and if, because you could even use the card that he's been developing this around is one that's very versatile. It goes in PVMs that are analog only all the way up to the highest end BVM that there really is a D series. Now, is it the L card, like equivalent to Martin's? Yeah, it's the exact, it's based off Martin's, reverse engineering of the original BKM 129X. And, you know, this was, goodness gracious, it seems like when you think about this kind of projects, it really makes you feel like you're old when you're talking about stuff that you're like, oh my goodness, this has been like 4 years ago now. When people were just like looking for this silly PVM card, and now it's just blossomed into this madness. But, yeah, those are some great designs. The fact that you could get HDMI in, and if you can send it in the analog form, and or all the way up to 1080i, really, on those
with your multi-formats.
Yeah, with the multi-format ones, that's pretty pretty amazing.
Because then it dawned on me, well, what outputs HDMI RetroTink 5X?
Yeah.
So you're sending a signal straight to that.
Is that it?
You don't have to do nothing. Yeah, the output of the RetroTink 5X goes straight into this card. Wow.
Yeah. We're getting. Wow, that is. Yeah, it's exactly what you need to do. To have them.
I wanted to
the
ask
most
you about
expensive portable D9 in the world that could do analog to HDMI back to an analog tube. Oh, so cool.
I wanted to ask you about cards, because I've sort of cards at a BVM, because I've sort of generically just said BVM card, but not every monitor has the same card. Like, I only have one, I think I have the 9L, is it 9L5? That can take those cards.
Okay.
All my 14s and my 20, I've got the 20 E1E or whatever, the E1E, anyway.
Yeah.
That one doesn't take the same cards.
No. It takes a bigger card.
Right, takes a bigger card. So it's not actually very useful for me. But not all. What are the most common BVM cards? Is it those ones for the L series?
Man, there's I'm sure that the more common one, just looking online, would be something that's for the bigger BVM series, the 20-inch one, kind of like the ones that you have, and it would be just random, silly, extra input video cards that would do maybe like component video for like your monitor. Or like the F series monitor. And if you actually found an E series or an F series that was 14 inches, those used the bigger cards. So they used the same size cards as the 20 inches. So that's a reason there was so many of those cards, because it was in both sizes. But then you get into the one where Shank is working on. That one was only going up to the 14 inches. They had smaller cards in that one. And then when you got up to the 20 inches, they went back to the same size cards that you have in your E series. It's the same size. Now, these cards are not interchangeable between families, really.
So the 20L, am I just making up monitors? The 20L5, is that a real monitor?
Yeah, that's the multi-format.
Right, that's
PVM.
the big one.
That's
so that
the
takes the
20-inch
big ones.
No, actually, that's funny enough.
That's where I was going with this.
That's funny enough. No. So the 20, we were talking about BVMs before. Now we switch over to PVMs. Okay. In the PVM format, there are some 20-inchers, and those are all the L2s, L4s, and L5s. Those each have a single slot in the back of them, and that will fit one of these cards in it. So any of these family of cards that we're talking about that Shank has been working on. And really, if you haven't seen them already, go over to Shank's Twitter, because I'm not going to do like a video on every single console that Shank puts on a BVM. That would be funny. All right, here's another short. Shank put this on a BVM. Shank put, it's all referring to one tweet where it's like 8 different items he has designed on these cards.
Dude, at least 10
Game Boy
minutes of
Advance.
10 minutes of every podcast is something like, Shank did this.
Yeah, a Raspberry Pi fit up for a card, Raspberry Pi on a card, which is another great idea, because then, well, I mean, I still feel like probably between the two, and Shank would, I'm sure, agree, you'd just rather have the Wii on the card than the Raspberry Pi, unless you were doing something else with the Pi, like very different, maybe. And then, of course, like a D10 Nano on a card. That's obviously probably possible, but
that's crazy as well. That's
right. So
what is, coming back to that question where you said, what's the most common card? But I was trying to phrase my question like, what's, of all the monitors that you've seen, would you say very broadly, most of them, is the most common card format this smaller one? Or what's the most common card format?
No, because again, it's not the most common one that I'll see are the bigger ones.
The big ones, okay.
And then, but it's hard to say now. I haven't really gotten a load of cards in years. It's like, it's all probably kind of rare now. But I seem to see less of the smaller cards, and maybe they were easy to like recycle and just toss out or something. I'm not sure, because they're smaller, or if they just didn't make as many of them. I've only seen like a handful of the S video card, like that Sony made. And then we know that some of the cards, even for like the A series, they only made 300 of certain ones.
Right.
So it's hard to say, but I believe the reason that, again, I see the most of that big card format is because it was the same size as like and that's, again, there's like a G series, an F series, and an E series that were all analog only. And they had 14 and 20s, and each of those had the same size cards. So they're the bigger ones.
Okay.
And then the D series has bigger ones, and every other bigger one has a bigger card.
Okay. So there's many formats of card. They certainly weren't standardized, and you really got to pay attention if you need some inputs. Because I don't see many cards for sale on eBay. I don't see much sort of flowing
I might have
past
some cards right here somewhere if you want me to grab them. But,
it's all right.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. I'll be gone for a minute then, but.
Yeah, no, it's all good. But let's keep on moving then. So we wanted to have a longer talk in this episode, and Steve's got more experience with this. I'm just getting into it. eBay selling, where it's at right now. We've got some things that are specifically US.
Yeah,
tax
definitely.
requirements that are very interesting. My perspective is eBay's lovely, but I live in the United States of Europe, where there are often local sellers and local marketplaces and things like that. So let's start off. What are some of your feelings right now? I know a tweet this week kicked it off.
Yeah. So I'm not. For years, selling on eBay, I felt like was kind of a fun experience, and it wasn't so much about making a lot of money, but it was about having a place where you could easily go if you wanted to and list items and then sell the item, and you were of course always paying fees. And if you were doing this on a basis of being a business person to make money from this, like, again, I'm not talking about the guys that you see on YouTube that have like their sheds full of stuff they've been buying all year from yard sales, and they sell for 100 times that price on eBay every day with like 100 listings. That's a business, and you should be, and you have been, I'm sure, if you're in that business, legally reporting all your income as a tax basis. But anyway, back to the problem now. So eBay used to be really great, but this year it's kind of a storm of maybe a couple of things happening at the same time. And one of those is in the United States. They lowered a threshold for where you get a taxable income document. And that makes a big difference if you sell on eBay, because this new law requires eBay, PayPal, like Venmo, Cash App, things like that. They have to now report transactions over $600. And that's just not like one transaction. That's every transaction that you do. Okay. So that's just part of the things that have been implemented this year. And then it's been probably 2 years since I've actually sold anything on eBay. I sold a lot of stuff for a while. Like, I have a good 100% rating and lots of feedback. So it's been a long time since I sold anything. I recently, right after the Super Bowl in the United States, which had the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Philadelphia Eagles in this game. And the only reason that's relevant to this story is the quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. I had a couple of 2 rookie cards from packs of cards that I had sent to a grading company, and they put a grade of 9 out of 10 on there, and it's PSA grading. And so this is a little bit of an overview of that, but anybody who knows anything about what I'm talking about understands, like, that's the way you get basically the highest price for your collectible on the market. You get it graded, and then there's like, you can go on and you could see an exact amount that's paid for that graded item at that grade. So anyway, I wanted to just cash in on a couple of these things. I mean, I wanted to see how much I could sell them for, so I got on there, and they were selling right around $90 each. So I had got mine out. I put them on there. It's really easy with this. You just create a listing, and I put them up there, and I put them at like the price that would sell. I'd go $1 less, so that if you would get on there and you would search new listings, cheapest price, it would show mine first, hopefully. So I got in there, I did that, and it used to be like that. You would get pretty good traction like that, and the stuff would sell rather quickly. This time it wasn't getting like sold. Not only that, it wasn't getting like viewed. It was getting like 10 views, and it didn't make sense because this item was selling a lot. This was right after the Super Bowl, like the day after, up into that first week. And I mean, nobody's looking at this listing. It's got like, each one of them has like 30 views over a week. So finally, eBay starts sending me these offerings. It's like, well, would you like to pay us to promote your listing? And I was like, you know what? These sons of bitches, I bet you your stuff never sells anymore unless you do this. So I was like, forget it. I'm gonna click yes, and I'm just gonna see what happens. And so I click yes, and lo and behold, like 24 hours later, the listing has gotten, tenfold the views and watchers on the item that it had for the prior 7 days, like combined, right? And
was the price still $1 less?
Yeah, it was like the lowest best price of this said item for buy it now. People were doing auctions, and they'd go for like $1 or $2 more than the price I had at.
So this item has a pretty firm, pretty established price. It's not like some of our more obscure items where like, well, it's about 60. This is like really, we know the well-known price.
That's the good thing about these like style of items. When you get them graded, it's like there's the solid price. Today's market price. One was, you have like, again, a half a dozen of them that just sold in the last 24 hours. It's very easy to go and say, all right, at eBay, it sells for this dollar figure. So anyway, yeah, that's like an item.
So to play devil's advocate with this situation, eBay, the point is eBay didn't promote you until you gave them money, which I believe is true, right? But did you also maybe next time try experimenting rather than $1? Maybe for $1, people like, this guy hasn't fucking sold anything for 2 years. Who the hell is this Steve? What kind of name is Nutter? I'm not buying from this guy. Fuck it, I'll go to a trading card, well-known trading card store for $1. So what if you made it $5 less? Still nothing. Does $10 make it? How much lower do you have to put it to make that interesting?
7% too. but I mean, it doesn't like.
So the ad is 7%.
It is interesting. I don't know how many of those buyers are actually going in and because again, if you look at me, if you look at my sales account from a distance, unless you went in there, and it still does have some seller feedback just logged in there, but I maintain buying things on there, of course. So there's like 600 feedback on it, and it's all 100%. So I don't know. There probably is some people that probably look at it and go, oh wait, no, this guy actually isn't selling anything for a long time. But prior to this, what I would sell is comic books most of the time. I'd go find some comic books in bins and sell them for, $1 or $2 more than I make on them a couple times, or twice, $5 or something. But that's how you like build up, the over time, the reputation on the website. But you get to the point where, again, I paid the extra 7%. And like on this $85 items, they both sold like pretty fast, less than a week.
Suspiciously fast.
I mean, within a week and close to each other, right? So they sold to good buyers, and which is good. I mean, you want a good buyer. I packed them up, but shipped them both out, and they were about $4.50 in postage a piece. And that was another thing I've always done on those kind of items, is put free shipping in the US where I pay the shipping costs, and instead of collecting an extra $4 for shipping, because something about people seeing free shipping used to make them want to buy more and be more prone to buy from me if you're offering free shipping. And it really doesn't matter anyway, because if I collect shipping fees, eBay would still take a percentage of the shipping fees that I was paid. So it's like, why even just add the shipping cost to the item and put that as
How much was the item, if I can ask?
It was $85. That was the listed. Both of them were $85 a piece.
85. So it was actually, the other ones were selling for 86, 87.
Yeah, they were selling, well,
like
it was more like between 85 to 89 was like the sales point at this time period. It is an asset that changes. That's why people don't, that's why they're still on auction. So it goes down like $5, goes up 10, goes down, blah, blah, blah. So
that's interesting. So you've had to pay eBay for the ad, which is another 7%. So you've essentially, to make your ad sell, you've got, like, I'm sitting around, I'm Steve, nothing's selling, I got some choices. I can either pay 7%, which is $6, and make eBay, get put into the algorithm and you pay. So you lose $6 there. Or my plan was reduce the price, but you can, if you reduce it $6 to make people buy it, that's
is that more than 6%?
I've given, $6 is the 7%.
Yeah. So
either I discount it by $6, or give eBay $6. Somehow you gotta give away $6.
Yeah, to get it on
sell
this
this item.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that consideration. But the weird thing was, it's like I'm looking at the money I actually got back, and it's like they paid me out directly now instead of paying to PayPal. Which, thank goodness, golly, I couldn't imagine if you got paid to PayPal and then you got double this tax document just because you got money into PayPal than out of PayPal. So anyway, they paid me directly. And the first one, after I sold it for $85 and paid the $4.50 to ship it, my cut given back was like $53. And I was like, what? And so I've not researched it. I don't know what the level of fees are on items specifically from them. But I was blown away and by how low that was. And then I sold the second one, and they paid me for some reason a little bit more. So I thought maybe they paid me a little less on the first one, and the other one was about $63. So the second time they paid me a little more. But yeah, I was like blown away with paying, so much in the fees. And then if you think about it, you subtract $450 from what they actually paid me at the end of the day, because I had to ship it on my own. And I was like, golly, that's disgusting. I was like, I'd have rather gone on and this is what we're talking about. What are the alternatives to that? So we don't have to jump into that quite yet, but you could think, well, like you said, instead of selling it on eBay for $85, and you're actually taking home only about 50 of that to 55 after your costs of everything, you're only taking home 50 to $55. Would you be better to go meet some guy at a card shop and sell it to him for $50 and not have the headache at all? Just hand it to him, get your $50 and go on your merry way. And I'm thinking that the answer is obviously now has been forced to, for me personally, yes. It's like it's a better idea to go and almost take like a 20 to 30% loss on an item and realize that's the insanity of the eBay fees now. And that just makes me feel more sympathetic for people who try to sell items on eBay and realizing how much they're actually paying in fees. Like, that's the silliest thing, isn't it? Like the people flipping these video games that are new, buy them for $60. Well, you have to sell that for $90 to make $10.
Just to make money off that. It sounds very much like, everyone's moving money around columns to try and do a bit of fuckery. Like even you are a little bit, because you're taking the shipping out to try to do a little bit, right? I'll integrate the shipping so there's no shipping fee like there. And it's a common thing, maybe you take money out of the base, or you do the opposite and then you put more in shipping and you feel like, well, that's shipping, so it's okay. And you feel better about yourself, even though you've paid net or whatever the same amount of money. So money can be moved around columns to influence people, definitely. And to me, that's all eBay has done here. So they want you to sell. It sounds like what they're saying to you is you can just list the shit on your site, and maybe no one will find it for this amount of money. But if you pay plus 7%, then it'll also get pushed out to people. Now, this might work to your advantage if you have a platform to bring people in which case eBay just becomes dumb, right? eBay just becomes, even less valuable. So, comparing that to like somebody with a platform that they can directly talk to people. Yeah, much. So that's not useful. We have a thing here when we sell comedy tickets in Estonia. There's the largest ticket selling website. Now there's other ones, but they were the dominant one for years. And so now there's a scheme where when I sell a ticket, the commission is 6% to them, which actually not that bad. I actually don't have complaints with this company compared to Ticketmaster. I know how shit things are with Ticketmaster. So these guys are all right. 6% if I sell a ticket. However, If I add a little tracking code to the URL, so if someone goes to their website, there's an extra bit at the end of the URL, and that means I sent them there. Someone came from our social media, from our website, from our Facebook. If I have sent the customer to the website, they've got the tracking token. And when the ticket seller detects the tracking token, the sale is only 4.5% commission. So meaning, what that means, if a customer walks into the website on their own, comes from their own channels, it's 6%. If I send the customer there from my channels, 4.5%.
So you're trying to fight the actual natural whatever following here and get as many people going through your route to get your business more of a percentage.
Sure. So we are incentivized in this situation to get people going through our link. So, for example, when I put a post on whatever social media and, it says, get tickets now at this link. Now, I have two choices. I could send them the company's called Pileta Levy. I could send the Pileta Levy link, like a big long thing. What I do is I just create like Dylan Moran is coming. He's a famous Irish comedian. I just registered dylanmoran.ee, and then it just redirects to the ticket vendor with the big long URL that has the tracking code. So our message to customers is just go to dylanmoran.ee, get your tickets there. And then they go there and they're like, oh, I'm on Pileta Levy. Yes, I know this is the regular web seller. And we still have a logo that says the ticket seller's website. We're not trying to hide it.
Right.
So in that way, by proving that we can bring people in, we get a slightly lower commission. So something similar with eBay, but then, if you're bringing the people in yourself, let's say Steve, he's a wonderful influencer. So many people follow Steve and the influence that he puts out over the retro gaming community. He's a part of the Illuminati. Ooh. That's what I've heard. So if you are bringing people in and you don't need eBay's algorithm, then the question comes, is there a better place? I just need to take someone's money, do a credit card transaction, essentially.
Right. Well, that's a situation I run into normally because I don't. The only reason in this specific instance I sold this type of a collectible is because, like you said, this is not a normal type of collectible that I sell very often. Yeah. I do sell sometimes. There's another guy I know that his dad actually runs card booths. So I've sold him a lot, but I do the same thing for him. I'm completely reasonable. So I sell him stuff at like 50 to 60% of its high market value because I know he has to make money. He's got a shop and he luckily
you get money
has
in your pocket right now.
That's right. I got pocket money now. And so it's a good way to get rid of it. You get to get rid of a good portion of it. Everybody feels happy, and it's a win-win. He can go make money off it in his business, and I don't have to hold 1,000 things in my, area anymore. You can clear out some storage. But the other problem that triggered a lot of people in this post about eBay was the whole tax thing. So we can, another problem is that tax threshold in the United States where, and we'll just go into this briefly because again, we're not trying to promote I'm not, because Lewis, you don't even know what I'm talking about.
I'm learning.
So let's just go through a little bit of this educationally because we're not trying to promote anything illegal, but we need to know what really happens because if you're selling stuff on eBay, etc., you need to know what's really going to happen. And like I said, if you're already running a business where you're selling things, you're normally, unless you're Al Capone, you're not hiding your income. Unless you're that style, you're not hiding your income when you're selling a lot of items. So prior to this year, the threshold was like $20,000. Wow. So the threshold goes, and it's like 200 items. So if the idea was if you sold under 200 items in an annual period or less than $20,000, you didn't have to worry about getting a 1099. Well, they reduced that to just the $600, which is an incredibly low number. That's like jumping off a cliff. That $600 threshold is normally the threshold where if I go and work for somebody, as either an employee or whatever, once I get over $600 in income from them, that's the level that I have to get a tax document from them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the level. If you work under $600 for a company for a week, they still report you the taxes, but that's not going to generate an actual tax document. Okay. So in America. Okay. So if you do that, but anyway, the $600 problem on eBay is how many items are there going to be now that are going to be sold on eBay that are going to generate over $600. And then you have all these people that maybe sold one or two things that are really high-end items, unless they kept good documentation of the time they purchased said item. How do they deduct off the cost of that item? That's the only way. It could be like, for example, we're in the CRTs. If you are, little Stevie Retro, and you run around and you got your dream PVM, but you bought it at the height of free money insanity in the United States in 2020, and you were a keyboard warrior, you finally picked one up, and you got it shipped to your house. Everything was great, but you paid $2,700 for the thing on eBay. Now, thankfully, you have that transaction somewhere in your eBay history. Mm-hmm. But if you think about it, you're going to go now, and if you tried to resell that item on eBay, you're not going to make the original $2,700 unless you sell it for $3,500. Then you'll clear $2,700 after the fees. Mm-hmm. But not only that, you've generated a tax document that says you generated $3,500 that you're accountable to the IRS to. And then you got to say, okay, well, it's fine. I've got my documentation here from where I purchased said item. But then you're responsible for keeping that documentation filed in your files for 7 years. In case you get audited, they could go back 7 years and say, what were you doing? Where did this money come from? So that was my big complaint. It wasn't to tell anybody to try to avoid the taxation if you're running a business, right? That wasn't the sneaky thing, because the thing that really set me off about the Twitter post, and I suggest anybody go check it out. I made it on like the February 24th. You can follow that thread, and there are like some serious simping for Uncle Sam out there where these people are like, well, if you just question this system, you're obviously a tax cheat. And I was like, you jerk off. No one's
the most un-American
I was like,
thing I've ever heard.
What kind of simp are you doing? And I laughed. Roger posted this thing about bootlicking meme, and I was just dying. But I was like, how? And again, they're like, well, this is actually the law. And I'm like, dude, just because it's the law doesn't mean it can't be bitched about. And it doesn't mean that they pass laws that are always great. There are always laws that are passed that can be retracted. This is not a good law. This is going to, for me personally, I feel like this on top of the extra fees you're paying selling on eBay. If you're somebody who just sells a couple things on eBay, then you'd be like, maybe I'll just sell $500 worth and then I'll just stop, because I don't want to have to worry about all the documentation that comes with getting the 1099. I don't want to worry about it. So you get the
1099, then you got to prove. So you've got to hold the purchase receipts for those items, so you can later prove that this is not just $500 easy money in my pocket that I paid or whatever amount, $400 or more or less or whatever it is, but I can prove a payment for that and therefore show the tax man, look, I'm actually only earned net 50 or whatever.
Right. Or you took, that's what I don't understand. Like in businesses, if you take a bunch of, what are these people if they take a bunch of losses? Why can't they write off losses all of a sudden on their taxes on the stupid shit they sell? And then, like, I don't understand. Is that the next manipulation of the tax code? Is people are going to say, oh, well, I lost $5,000 selling this on eBay, and so that means I get to have a $7,000 or $5,000 write-off on my taxes this year. So
is that how it works?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Is that the insanity of this whole system? I don't get it. So maybe if there's anybody that's actually followed that over here and struggled to get through this whole spiel, and you're like, oh, Steve, you're so completely wrong on this subject, feel free to let us know how
the tax law changed, and you don't like the change.
Oh,
right?
yeah. It makes things a pain in the neck.
Tax. It changed. Not only is there's cost to you, because now you've got to pay the tax on that. You've got to not only that, there's the administrative cost that you have to go through to prove that, right? That is also time and money for you to keep all those receipts and then prove it all and do all that later. It's not tax evasion, because my question then, so in theory, in your great United States of America, if I sell something for $700 on eBay, then it gets automatically 1099. Government finds out about it, rah, rah, rah. But in theory, then, if we are simping for the government, does that mean that if I sell my couch for $700, I am supposed to report that to the government?
It's already been reported. That's the thing. Once you sell the 1099 is a government document. It goes to the government and to the tax person. So
but let's say I sell it cash.
Yeah,
right?
No,
In theory,
that's the thing. If you go down and you sell it through cash, no, you don't have to.
Why? Why is cash? What? Because it's not done on eBay. It's the same transaction, let's say.
But
done on
the
eBay,
thing.
it tracks the
They
1099.
probably want to move to like digital currency to try to eliminate from people
Well,
from
everything will
even
get
doing
tracked.
that.
So that's I'm kind of going through these simp arguments, right? So legally, though, it says if I sold that couch for $700 in cash, if I was being 100% letter of the law, good Boy Scout, whatever. Should I? So there's not an obligation to report that.
Oh no!
No
you
one
mean
never
like
would.
why would you why would you report that? That doesn't even like in America. If you sell your house and you don't profit beyond a certain level, you don't even have to report that. That's the weird thing. Like there's so many. That's the thing. American tax law is insane. It's like 5 times longer than the Bible, maybe 10 times. So it's definitely got so much jargon in it, and it's meant to be so complicated and complex. And then all they do is they say they want to simplify it, and then instead we get stuff where it's not simplified. It's actually more difficult. Again, if somebody lived in a household and they were selling $4,000-$5,000 worth of stuff on eBay, but it wasn't the thing, like they weren't profiteering off it, right? It's like, over the year, like you bought your couch. If you're selling a couch for $700, you bought that couch for $5,000 because there's no way it's going to hold its value, right? Sure. So that's the thing. Is like all of a sudden, if you sell it on this platform is obligated to report that to the IRS. If you sell it in the wanted ads on the newspaper or in Facebook Marketplace. And I don't know if eventually all that will change, but that's kind of like, what's your alternative to eBay? You know, you still have these archaic things in America like Facebook Marketplace. And if you want to go really old school, regular. You can do Craigslist.
Yeah, okay.
And,
I mean, also here in Europe, every country has its own different solution. So eBay, there's not really a pan-European online classifieds. So you've got to know the particular one in each country, or there's a number of them. Facebook Marketplace is not too bad. Whenever I travel, I can just change the location and do a quick check. So I don't think they're archaic. But before we do want to talk about what's next, because what to do. But before we do that, there is one more big downfall of eBay, and I have to admit, it's scaring me a little bit when I think about doing it, which is this returns policy. This seems like the fucking Wild West, where people can just be like, nah, didn't get it. Nah, it was broken. Nah. And then all of a sudden, for low volume sellers, that seems like could be a real trap if you happen to get someone who doesn't want to play ball with you.
Well, there's people that will use these burner accounts pretty much on eBay, and they'll buy items. You can look on YouTube. I've seen a couple of videos where people have sold, like you said, high ticket items, right? And they get bought and they get paid for immediately by the credit card. And then like when right after they ship it, they get reported as not arriving. And then they like send back a box that's just basically an empty box with a box inside. So it feels like it has something in it. And I've seen that happen. And then nowadays, like the credit card companies are fighting to pay that transaction because it could be a stolen credit card that was used to pay for it to begin with. And if that's the case, then you're screwed. You know, like if you get paid by a stolen credit card, they're just taking money away from you. So it's a tricky situation.
It seems a bit scary. Now, on the other hand, I do understand why that system might be there. And absolutely, I'm not trying to say that is a completely negative system. It is very good for the buyer. There is unfortunately people who will take care of it. So in looking for another solution, we're not sort of trying to avoid customer protection. I think it's more, we can Actually, we'll get into a moment. I got to go to the toilet. But it's more like, is there a better solution for Steve? Is there a better solution for individuals without needing, do that? Let me just go to the loo, and then we're going to go into what the hell else can we do besides eBay?
Sounds good. Let's do that. You want to jump back in there?
All right, yeah, so we'll go back. All right. We've had the toilet break. So finally, look, eBay sucks for a number of reasons, it seems. The fees are going up, the hidden fees, all this voodoo about do you have to sponsor the ad. Not only that, then tax implications are growing and growing and growing. It's less of this community-style spirit of selling something, and it's more like, I don't know, that. And as a seller, you at least need to be wary of these return policies and at least understand what could possibly happen. So there's a lot of that. So the question then becomes, what the hell else do you do? Do we have to run our own web shops these days? Or what do we...
Well, man, it's almost like that. I don't know what the fees are for Etsy and those other places, but I feel like you're still going to run into any one of these like internet-based companies where you actually list an item and you use their site probably to collect money through it. But then I don't know. There's certain items that are sold on Facebook Marketplace where I live, where it seems like they're sold directly through Facebook. So I don't.
But Facebook is that's an interesting one. Facebook and Craigslist might be. Let's put them in categories.
Yeah.
Facebook and Craigslist are just marketplaces. You've still got to connect, do an external transfer. Etsy, eBay, and other platforms where you can take their money in the platform. That's different.
That's the idea.
I think they're very different offerings.
And that's yeah. So that's the only like thing left out there is going out to a physical swap meet or having another avenue to facilitate a sale. And then, like you said, you're taking on the personal risk of collecting the payment, all that, and the personal responsibility of doing that. So it's going backwards, right? It's going backwards to like what we said, the early days of Craigslist, the early days of Facebook Marketplace, and even I had mentioned this to Bob as a laughable idea, but again, like a classified ads place where you just go and say, hey, I have this for sale, right? Where like people could go in and just list something on a classified style platform, similar to what they're doing on the other marketplaces. But then, of course, Bob rightfully so said there would be too many crazies would associate a retro RGB with like being a ripoff because something happened in their transaction through the website. So I completely understand.
Those customer protections can be useful. We're not trying to discredit them or say like, oh, it's a horrible thing. But
if something bad did happen, right? Somebody used that and like robbed somebody, right, of something because.
So whatever. I guess it's about the number of transactions. Like if you're doing such a low amount, there is a possibility now with your position in your platform that you could know those people, make direct contact with them. I guess try to.
Yeah,
that's what I.
Well, the best probably the way you're going to pay it doesn't really matter somewhat because if you're using a payment system, there's only like one electronic payment system that I know of that won't generate the 1099, and that is the payment system of Zelle, Zelle, and it's like tied to bank accounts all over. That transactional thing does not generate the 1099, so it's either that, but there's also zero buyer protection with that, right? You send the money to wherever you send it, it is gone, and there's no getting it back. It's done. And so there's that method of payment, and that's similar to cash. So that and cash. So those are your only two methods of payment that aren't going to be like logged in this new logging system. So either way, most of the time people are going to use some other form of electronic payment like PayPal, Venmo, Google Pay, whatever they use. And that's always going to now draw that 1099. The thing is maybe you can get in places and, like I said, avoid a lot of these 20+% points you're paying selling the thing on eBay. If you have to pay the fee anyway, you could go into specific groups on Facebook that are actually sellers, like the PVM group I promote sometimes in Facebook. There's a group where listings come available. People, if they want to sell it, they'll put it on there for a PVM. So if you have an item that people want and you want to just, there's groups like for every asset that you can meet buyers that are looking to buy, and you can list the item in there like that. And on top of that, in the general marketplace. So that's another avenue.
Those sites, so they're Craigslist, Fakeless Marketplace, who are saying sites that don't accept or don't need you to give payment to them, right? They also, however, tend to be more regional based, because if I'm not paying you online, then I have to meet you or do some sort of, let's say in Europe, I should have maybe at least in the same country, I can do a bank transfer super easy and, you know, stuff like that. So those styles are like this older style. And what that's telling me is that in your grand union of a large country, to sell to somebody, there's value in buyer protection, both for the buyer and the seller. And it's bad sometimes, but you're saying, oh, buyer protection is bad sometimes for the seller, but then you're like, well, it is kind of needed, some form of that. So apparently, if we want to sell to people a long way away, buyer protection is something that needs to be factored into that. If you wish to sell to the national market, then buyer protection, the cost of that, needs to be factored into that transaction somewhere. If you don't want to pay buyer protection, then you're limited to your local geographic regional area. It's just another cost of business, I guess, is a way to look at that. Well,
yeah, and then like you're correct on the fact about buyer protection being important, because anytime you become a buyer, you want buyer protection, because 99% of the time buyers are legitimate that are buying something, and they're not trying to run a scam, and they just want to have a peace of mind that you're not trying to rip them off, or that you'll do what you said. Now, if you personally, like, what can Steve do? Well, Steve has a lot of options, because I've got a social media presence within a market, and I can easily go those places and avoid all these, pitfalls. However, at the same time, I'm in business. So when I make business transactions that involve stuff that are in my business, I still, even though I would be wise to go about finding the least expensive way to collect a payment and to capitalize on getting as much of that said payment into my business, right? I shouldn't have to go and be forced to pay 3% to PayPal if I don't have to. If I've built up a good enough reputation where buyers feel protected enough in just my word. That's the key. But it's hard. It's not going to be, like I said, I'm lucky because, I have some place, and I think even if you have just even somewhat of a following within a sphere on Twitter, a lot of people I see list things on there and seem to do very well. You don't have to have a huge following. And then I know that some different types of items sell better on other platforms. There's people that sell things on Instagram.
I was sort of trying to break down the costs a little bit. Let's say there's a cost, because they're different costs, right? So there's a cost for PayPal, and that is like a financial transaction cost. Then there's eBay, which is a commission, shipping, which is, I guess, a cost of doing business. And then there's the IRS, which you also can't get around.
Well, there's taxes, right? Anytime you make profit, you have to pay. That's what you don't, that's all it's based on. But just like anybody, you can't confuse revenue with profit. There are businesses that like Google probably makes, how much revenue do you think Google has? Billions of dollars. But at the end of the day, the whole company is not making that much profit. It's 99% on those big levels spent and 1% profit. But smaller businesses is taking in higher percentage profits, but you have to expense that. And you can't just say that the whole amount on the 1099 is money you're just going to straight pay the taxes on that amount.
Sure. So there comes out of these four categories that I've identified, which is PayPal money transfer structure, eBay seller commission, shipping, and the IRS. Four things, right? PayPal, 3%. I think as a cost of doing business, you have to expect some fee for moving money. If money gets moved electronically, whether 3%, 1%, 0.5%, I don't know. But there will be a cost no matter what. If you don't hand somebody physical cash, then you have to pay somebody to run it through their computer system. So there's that fee. IRS, we've agreed, that's something else. Shipping is a service. The thing that I'm thinking is you can screw down the eBay cost, which is use a different vendor, use a different platform. So if they're charging, what's their percentage? 8 or something? What did you say it was?
No, it's much higher than that. The 7% was just the promotion to promote the item.
Promotion.
It
So
used to be. It used to be like
fee
10 to 13% normally for eBay, but now I don't know. I'd have to go. I'll check on the next episode if we want to bring it up again. If there's a lot of question about that, I'm sure somebody who's listening, if you're still there, you can put in the chat how much the percentage is maybe for us if you know on normal sales. But it's over double-digit percentage just to list it and sell it on their site.
So I would imagine if you were, let's say, again, influencer, person who can bring their own customers, you don't need, that's the difference here. You don't need the algorithm to show it to people. I'm Steve. I'm going to put that listing and then I'm going to tell all my followers I'm going to do that work. In that scenario, you could then use another seller, a more independent seller, smaller company, some other upstart, eBay, platformy, Etsy, I don't know, these different ones. Because you don't need Etsy to be huge and their algorithm to be great. You just need people to, you send them to the Etsy page and they're going to check out there. Government is still a thing. Shipping is still a thing. Maybe some PayPal fee or a few percent for the transaction. That's still there.
What about like a retro, like let's think what could be done here. Imagine if somebody could code just a classifieds website for like retro stuff, right? And it would be classified. It would just be categorized again by whatever the material is, or like a gaming consoles and then you go in and you just find things that were listed and you could do listings. You'd pay a small fee like you would for the old newspaper. But the whole point of this thing is you'd have to externally conduct the monetary transaction, like you said.
No. Isn't that Craigslist though?
Yeah.
What you just described?
but it's not national. Like, and it's not specific, I guess. Like, you can't get on Craigslist and look at everything in the United States because it might be too crazy. No, it's like they're regional. So that's, like you said, that's a very regional setup, but maybe it would be just too much stuff to sort through. I have no idea, because I guess if you did have every item listed on a classified ad, it might be a nightmare to try to sort through. So it's not a perfect idea.
I have an idea. I don't know if this is this is more of a joke, but I have a place for you, a seller, a website that will help you, that provides buyer protection, and you can escape the pesky, ever-seeing eyes of the U.S. government. Dude, list it on AliExpress. That's what those Chinese guys do. Send your money through Badaboom, whatever their app is. Keep it with the Reds over there in China. U.S. government's never going to see that shit. Yeah, there's still some buyer protections on. Yep. Just that's exactly how Retro Castle, they're just small independent sellers who, okay, Retro Castle himself has no following before that, so he needed to use the algorithm of AliExpress. Dude, I'm telling you, maybe you'll see the Zez Retro gear available for sale on AliExpress.
Yeah, it's an interesting time because this is all rolled out relatively quickly, like simultaneously. So when you talk about eBay, I don't see how 6 months from now eBay isn't really hurting, because a large core, I'm not saying like the vast majority of their sellers, but they're literally going to become a place where it's only the people who can make profits off this and do normal business. They're eliminating the whole segment of, like you said, the grassroots sellers on there that were just trying to go on there and flip a couple items a year. It really complicates that to the point where you either find a different way to sell it or you just don't sell it, I guess, right? You just don't deal with the hassle and the time. You just keep the item, donate it to charity, give it to something else. I don't know.
It's tough to sell that. And in Europe, I'm wondering, I know I need to list my items first, but I'm wondering what's the best forum or place for me to put my items. And even though I certainly don't have any following like you do, I'm still kind of thinking actually using my social media, because while I don't have a massive Twitter by any means at all, the people that are on my Twitter are very much my audience who may want to get these things, right? So okay, so that is something I'm thinking about. I don't really want to list on eBay because of the fees, because of I'm a bit worried. I've never the buyer protection thing, all those negatives. So I'm actually thinking about more. I don't know if that's just I have my own list on Twitter, like just really doing it, real independent. Who wants this?
Yeah.
And
I
selling
think
10, 15
that's
things.
a great way to go in. So if you're somebody now who doesn't have much of a presence in retro gaming or anything, yeah, that would be I mean, like I said, I've seen people have successful sales of items, and you just need a few people that catch on to you if you just into retro stuff, start posting a lot of retro stuff. And then a year later, you're going to have some people following you. Might only be 100, might be a couple hundred, but you'll have the right amount, enough people to, if you're selling something for a good price and you just request retweets, smaller accounts, people like me, if I see a good deal and I know that, like, if I see a good deal and I know that, like, people that I'm affiliated with might be interested in buying that, I would want the thing of like, oh yeah, look, I helped a little way of finding that person, somebody to buy this, and both these people are happy. Person A gets a good price for the item. They're not getting the top dollar on eBay that with all the fees involved. They're getting the fair price. Same thing with the buyer. They're getting the fair price they want to pay because they're getting the discount of all the junk that they're paying
this is a
for.
good time to mention talking about those communities. That's exactly what's on offer in the Retro Tech Patreon, where not only are you're posting when you see interesting links, I get them in my Patreon all the time. Here's a monitor if you're in this area, but then also your Discord of CRT fans who are sharing deals, as well as other people like Save the CRTs and other people doing good work. You've got a super niche community. So if we can identify our super niche communities, you don't need a big pool of potential buyers or some friggin' algorithm that's not going to show to the right people. Maybe
Exactly.
a bit of legwork yourself.
Yeah, and I thank you for the plug, Lewis. But just to give a good example, I had a recent person who joined Patreon this month. They were looking, they were really interested in getting a multi-format CRT, and I was like, a big one, 20-inch one, and anybody I want, they're like, I just kind of learned about PVMs, and I'm like, well, I want you to kind of take some breath and try to take some baby steps, because I mean, like, if you're willing to pay for it, don't worry, don't just buy these ones that are sitting on eBay. Let's try to see what else we can figure out. And I was like, I don't personally have any for sale, but if you want to go in, because I know there's plenty of collectors that are in, again, my Patreon and in that Discord, and there's an entire chapter and page on that Discord dedicated to sales and listings where people in the Patreon and Discord can go and list their own stuff. And everybody there kind of keeps each other in check on the pricing, because we all know, I mean, everybody knows, like, the fair prices about this. This isn't about ripping people off. And there's also times where, like this guy, I was actually getting ready to write him back saying I would recommend him consider going with something that would be a lot easier to work with and not so much finicky, like the PVM 2005 and the BVM, and so expensive. I know money is not an option or not a concern maybe, but at the same time, the kind of maintenance, that you required with those higher end multi-formats can be very inducive or, expensive over the years. You have to actually get those serviced to keep them running tip top. Whereas I was going to suggest like a PVM, on the 20-inch side that was a medical monitor, and he went into the Discord server. He found somebody that had some 2005s, but after talk to everybody, he decided to go with the PVM, which is the Olympus OEV 203, which is the medical grade 20-inch, which I was like going to recommend. I was laughing. I was like, well, they sent you, and they did all the work for me, because that's the one I would have said. And that one's easier to service. You have to service it like once every 20 years. It's not something that needs a lot of babying. It's pretty sturdy, good piece of hardware. So that, but that was an example of how eventually, and they didn't even pay, like, they paid a very fair price in the United States to get one, like under $800 for a working good one, which in the 20-inch PVM medical market, that's well below what they would normally sell for on a publicly listed site that was showing them working. So it's a success story.
I like that idea. And what struck me when you were telling me that story, Steve, is when people get into your community, there's trust. And to do any sort of business transaction, actually, mostly our business and our economy relies on trust. I trust that I'm going to give it to you and you're going to give me the payment and all of that. Now, we can have laws and different things that can help us, but as soon as our society gets bigger and bigger, and the point I'm bringing this back around to is when you're paying for eBay buyer protections, you're paying a fee for trust. And in your community, you don't need to pay a fee because we are in a small community, which is trustworthy. When you're selling to a rando, we've got to pay for trust. So that's how another way you can get down that fee, by being in a group of people or being in a community that you have at least a higher level of trust than a random person on the internet.
Exactly. And I'm not the only one who runs communities like this, but that is a very great point. If you find an interest into something, how little is it to invest like $1 in somebody's Patreon to get access to their community? Like, that's all it costs. And then you could literally save yourself, like in this case, this guy could have straight gone to eBay, never talked to me, bought one of these expensive monitors, got it to his house, and let's say it was fine, and then after 50 hours, it just developed some crazy problem, and then he's stuck with a $3,000 monitor purchase at his house, and instead, we're trying to help people not only avoid that, but at the same time, you don't have to worry again. You've got sellers that are other people within a community, and it's just like anything. It's like used hot rod cars, we always compare it to, or like motorcycle people, antique people. The communities in these marketplaces develop, and through those communities, you do get an opportunity to sell. And not only that, it's a good place to make like friends usually too. A lot of these people meet each other and they become friends. It's crazy.
That's interesting what you said about the buy and the sell. If you are getting into such a community where there is trust, that dude who, let's say, bought the $800 monitor, not only is a deal, so of course, anytime you get a deal, you could probably resell it later, but that product that you're buying is much easier to sell again. Like, you're also preserving your value down the line, because when it comes time for whatever reason, you decide to liquidate that monitor, you want to turn that back into cash. You then are on the other side of the spectrum. We're in a community, people know you, people are happy. All of a sudden, you're the buyer. It's also good to be the seller in a small community too. So,
well, it's a win-win, like you said, because people can then go and like there's an opportunity for some people to be able to sell monitors, and they're like, look, I found this PVM and I got an incredible deal on it. Like, I don't know, $100, $200. And they're like, I'm not looking to make, try to set it on eBay, ship it and be stressed out and try to make $3,000 off it. They realize, if they're part of the community, they just want to help other people get CRTs, grow the community, and most of the time. And then at the same time, they get to make some money back to invest into whatever they want on their collection, and or just to be able to not so much situations where you're making a lot of money. Like you say, you're buying something for $800. If you decide it's not for you, you could go back to the group, like you said, and you probably find somebody else very interested in either taking that hand off your hands for that price or that price plus a little bit. So, very good stuff.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Well, God, we're going for an hour 20. We've been going this.
Yeah.
It's a passionate topic for us. It's a passionate topic.
If you remember to
Hey,
cut the loose scene.
Yeah, that's true. That took us a bit longer there. So why don't we wrap it up? We're going to try, by this is done, but we're going to, this is going out on Monday, but the Friday, a few days before this, we're going to be trying our live stream. So let's give it a twirl tomorrow.
Technical difficulties will be alleviating us and leaving us alone.
Yeah. We'll give it a go. We just got to make a live, get one done, knock it out, and then I think we'll have some fun. Because we wanted to do this episode so you guys have got some proper content, and on the live stream we can just screw around and have some fun and do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Whew.
Just have some more
All
fun.
right.
All right,
Thank you, everyone, for watching Cathode Ray Podcast. Follow us, the platforms. Look, if you're here, I just want to appreciate that you got to the end of the podcast. We appreciate you listening very much. You are, we're very much thankful for that. So thanks very much for listening, Steve. See you soon, mate.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.